Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Ask the Doctors on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11, WCTV Channel 21, streaming on Facebook Live and also available on CTV3 in Connorsville. Your chance to ask our two doctors whatever questions you might have about what's going on with the COVID-19 situation. Information will appear on the bottom of the screen. You can put up a question on our Facebook page. You can also send us a question through Twitter at WCTV Info. Our doctors, once again this week into week 22 or something like that with this.
That's right.
Dr. Thomas Huth, Vice President, Medical Affairs, Reed Health. Thank you, sir. And Dr. David Jetmore, Wayne County Public Health Officer. How are you?
I'm great, Eric.
How's your week been?
Listen, another one came, another one went. I'm looking forward to the weekend.
Absolutely.
It's supposed to be a little bit less humid. I'm going to get my grass cut, do some weeding. It's going to be all good. You got out and enjoyed some golf today?
Yes, I'm not in my usual attire. I feel a little underdressed.
I miss the pocket square.
Me too. I miss it when it's not there. But I played in the Junior Achievement Golf Tournament this morning, and I'm not a very good golfer, so I didn't do my team very much good. But I would say if anybody wants to know how to run a public event right now, go talk to the JA people. They did a fantastic job with distancing and asking people to wear masks and providing plenty of hand sanitizer and so forth, and it was very well done.
Cool.
So Dr. Jetmore, I hope that you and Christine are not going to identify any outbreaks related to the Junior Achievement Golf Tournament.
I think that's unlikely. But I'm curious, as I'm sure our viewers are, is what your best and worst shot was during the tournament, Dr.
Well,
Huth.
I did a tee shot on the fairway, straight down the fairway, that our team used for our best ball, and then I came pretty close on a couple of putts. That was about it.
So no real diary entries there.
I think
maybe the tee shot.
I have an excuse. I'm rehabbing from a shoulder injury, so when I miss what I do poorly, that's my excuse. So, yeah, we're writing off this year for all kinds of reasons, COVID and golf and everything else.
Yeah, 2020 is just the year to forget sometimes, I guess. Let's go with, and I wanted to bring that up just because one of the things that you all have said through this is that while everything may not be completely back to normal as we know it, there are things that people are able to get out and do. You competing in a golf tournament, obviously one of those things. So,
yeah.
Cool.
But of course, we're going into a holiday weekend.
Yeah.
And I know that Christine Stinson, the Wayne County Health Director, is probably kind of on pins and needles.
She's
to see
warned
what
us.
comes from that, because so far it hasn't been great after July the 4th and
No, there's been
else.
after every public holiday, there's been an outbreak following that for obvious reasons. I mean, people.
But I think the key is people have got to realize that they may be taking precautions in some settings, and I work in healthcare, so I use that as the ultimate example. Plenty of people in healthcare are doing all the right things when they're working with patients. But it's other parts of their existence where, we let things go. And for healthcare workers, it's, what they do behind the scenes when we're, quote unquote, backstage or off stage, not in front of patients. We let the mask down, we huddle close together, and we have to really watch that. And that's something we're trying to teach closely to at the hospital. In the health system. But then really most importantly is what we do out in the community. We're all done with COVID. We've had it, we'd like to be over it and go back to our normal lives. But the reality is that's not possible. And so in order for a healthcare worker in a healthcare setting for that to get to a patient, it's got to go through these layers of defense. A healthcare worker has to acquire it in the community and spread it to coworkers and then expose patients. And so I'm teaching to the 3 lines of defense related to COVID protection in healthcare. We're teaching long-term care facilities about this. We're teaching the folks around Reed and anybody who will listen. But I think everybody can have a version of that kind of fits their existence. I have to be careful about what I do out in the community because that impacts my mother, who I have to take care of and who's at high risk. So we have to think about all those, the whole spectrum of our lives. And that's particularly important going into a holiday weekend where there's going to be picnics and there's going to be the last opportunity to use the pool, and all those things are fine, but we have to be careful and smart and vigilant about how we do them.
That's a good point. I think, especially when you're talking about nursing homes, I mean, those people aren't traveling, so anytime they get an infection, that's brought in. But I also think you can apply this to cohorts that we've all formed. It may be you and a few close friends, or maybe you and your children, your next door neighbor and their children. You're all kind of dependent on everybody in that group not to break that cohort. If that one person goes off to a large group gathering with no social distancing or mask, then the whole thing is threatened, much like it would be at a nursing home.
We heard about that this week with Dwayne Johnson. Said he got together with some family. He and his kids, his wife and his daughter, had been pretty tight-knit. They got together with some family members that they thought had been taking care of things, ended up with COVID. So it's where you do that. Anything else you want to throw in before we bring in our guest?
No, let's go right to Christine. We don't want to keep her waiting. I know how busy she is and how anxious she is to talk to us.
Joining us this week via Zoom, Christine Stinson, Executive Director, Wayne County Health Department. Good afternoon. How are you? You're muted, or we are. I'm not sure which one. Wow, our technical staff works on that a little bit. Tell me what you learned new this week.
Well, we are seeing about 11 cases a day on average test positive here in Wayne County, and that's kind of, we're at a plateau here. This number neither seems to be declining or increasing. It goes up and down between about 9 and 13 or 14 each day. So
Brian, can you hear me?
I guess the good news is it's not going up. The bad news is it's not declining.
Okay. We think we have our technical glitches worked out. It happens sometimes when you're doing live and bringing in Zoom. Christine, I think you can hear us. Let's see if we can hear you.
I can hear you.
We can
Yes.
hear you too.
We're in good shape. How are you today?
Good, good. I was saying how much I miss you guys. And so I appreciate you having me zoomed in here for that.
See, if you just come back to this seat, we could put her in your seat and everybody would be happy.
Christine, it's not the same without you, kid. So
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. You guys are doing a good job telling everyone where the status of Wayne County is right now. I am a little concerned about the upcoming weekend. We've kind of settled into this new higher high of a plateau. I don't think that we're in an increasing case right now, but we seem to have become comfortably numb with 50 to 60 cases a week. I'm not real comfortable with that. I would like to see us back down where we were looking at 10 cases a week and wringing our hands and really worrying about what we could do better. 50 to 60 cases a week is concerning coming into this weekend. I don't want to see next week us having over 100 cases and increasing cases at the hospital. We are experiencing right now an outbreak in a long-term care facility that we're watching closely and are concerned about. None are in the hospital, so that's a good thing. But like Dr. Hughes talked about, it has to be brought into them. So they get it from community spread, and then it's brought to our most vulnerable in the long-term care facilities. So being cognizant of what we do when we're not on stage. I like that, Dr. Hughes, and I've used it several times. So we just all need to be very, very aware of what we're doing and how we're exposing ourselves and our loved ones when we're in gatherings.
Just a real quick question for anybody who wants to answer. The kind of higher number that she's talking about that we're kind of holding on to, could that be because more people are actually using the testing center and we're actually, I'm not saying testing is causing it, but if more people are testing, we would obviously see more cases. Is that the case? Have you seen the numbers at the testing site go up and remain relatively high?
Well, Christine probably has more of a numeric answer to that. I would say it's playing a part, but it's a small part. I think, I don't think the number of tests we're doing are dramatically higher, at least in the past 4 to 6 weeks. What do you have to say about that, Christine?
Right. In the numbers that I can see, we've remained kind of stagnant at our testing numbers. And our testing numbers are good, and we want to keep those up. And that helps us have a more realistic positivity rate. When we're looking at our positivity rate, hovering right around the 4%, I think that shows that we're doing a really good job of testing and not just testing people that are very, very sick. So our OptumServe site is very utilized and is not going away. They are still contracted through the end of September and will be at the old Elder Billman site, along with the county has taken this testing grant, and we will be providing testing at the same location starting Tuesday. So you'll have some more information on that. It will be walk up. We'll probably do some dry run of drive-through testing capabilities at that, and we'll also be utilizing some strike teams as part of our testing. So we don't want to lose OptumServe. They do a tremendous site. I would still like to see that testing site go to the west side of the county. I'm looking for a site in Cambridge City or Hagerstown to take OptumServe out of Richmond and put them to the west, because we have a lot of testing capabilities here in Richmond.
So if we find a site for them, Optum will continue to test here in the county. It's a matter of finding them another site?
Correct. The state has went to a month-to-month contract with OptumServe, and I said, well, that's kind of hard to do long-term planning on month-to-month. What kind of guarantee can I have that I can keep OptumServe? And they said, if you can average 100 tests a day, they'll continue that for the foreseeable future. So at least until the end of the year, through this CARES Act cycle, if we can keep that OptumServe with over 100 tests a day, which I think that we could if we moved them to a visible location in the western part of the town, again, Cambridge City or the Hagerstown area, I think it would be utilized and a very valuable asset, not just a Wayne County. If we could get it out there, I think that some of our underserved neighbors would also utilize that service if we could strategically place that. So if anyone's listening to this and wants to reach out with me with any kind of options, I'm more than happy to hear that. It's really a philanthropic thing for you to do, to offer the OptumServe the space. It doesn't bring with it any revenue, but you don't have to provide them anything except for space and utilities. So you don't have to provide any kind of workers or anything like that. They bring all of their workers and stuff. We truly just need space for them somewhere.
Well, this sounds like a solvable problem. Surely we can sort this out. In the short term, when you're both in the Elder Bierman site, where are you going to be physically adjacent to one another? Will you be in a different part of the building? How will that be sorted out?
Yeah, the public really won't know much difference. We'll be offering walk-in services, and like I said, our site is going to be doing a lot of maybe drive-through and kind of stretching our wings and working out logistics things of ours. So OptumServe is going to continue just like, so if you've used that site, you'll enter the same exact doors, and really you won't be able to tell much of a difference at all between the county testing site and OptumServe as far as the type of test that's provided, the testing turnaround time, and the what you have to do to register. There's two different sites that you'll go to register, but if you walk in, either site will be able to help you, and we'll work that out. It'll be seamless. You really won't even be able to tell which you're going to, OptumServe or the county site. It will all be a COVID test.
Christine, you mentioned drive-in, and I know last week Dr. Jetmore mentioned a vehicle that you all were coming close maybe to putting your hands on. Is it getting closer that you're going to have this to be able to take out and talk a little bit about what this is going to be and what this is going to do for the health department and for the community?
Right. We're still on track to take possession of the mobile unit at the end of October, beginning of November, which happens to coincide with when the federal government is preparing counties to start preparing for the eventual vaccine for COVID-19. And so that mobile unit that was purchased by the commissioners for the CARES Act particularly is going to be utilized to do some outreach testing and definitely immunizations, whether it's the COVID vaccine, the flu vaccine, or just your general childhood immunization vaccine. So mostly it will be an immunization unit, but it'll be a mobile unit. If you think about kind of years past COVID, what will we use that for? I see us taking it to the fairs and be able to provide all kinds of, all the services that the health department does as far as clinical services go. So our harm reduction programs to our immunization programs out of that mobile unit.
I know one of the other things that you had mentioned was trying to put together a mask giveaway on the western side of the county. I think there's something coming up next week. I don't have a flyer in front of me right now, so help me out if I'm incorrect with my dates, times, or anything.
No, you are correct. I gave Ryan all of the times. I did not have a flyer made up because I just got the exact confirmations that we've locked down the locations. But on Saturday, February 12th, there will be another mask giveaway. It's not just on the west side of the county. We've spread it out throughout the county. So there'll be 4 locations that will simultaneously give away masks from 12 to 3 on Saturday, September 12th from 12 to 3. There'll be a site in Fountain City, and that's at 312 West Main Street in Fountain City. In Centerville, they'll be at Crown Creek Boulevard. I'm told that there's no physical address for the location that they'll be at there, but if you're familiar with Centerville, you'll be familiar with where they're giving those away. And then Cambridge City, they'll be at 215 East Parkway Drive. And then in Hagerstown, it'll be at 452 West Main Street. So Dan Burke, our preparedness coordinator, has worked really, really closely with all of the communities, and it will be the communities actually giving out the masks. So I think between their volunteer fire departments, their police departments, they are going to run their own sites and give the mask away. The commissioners have committed to give away as many masks as they gave away in the city, they'll give away in the county. And that was almost 300,000 masks that they've committed to give away on Saturday, the 12th.
Okay. We'll make sure to get that information and get it up. 4 sites next Saturday between 12 and 3, Fountain City, Centerville, Cambridge City, and Hagerstown. Before we let you go, Christine, anything else that you need the community to know?
I do. Also on the 12th, we are having a Super Shot Saturday. Hopefully Ryan can get that up. I did provide a flyer for that. So if your child is behind on their school immunizations, it's a walk-in clinic. You don't need to make an appointment. Just show up to the health department at 100 South 5th Street, and we will be able to get your child all caught up. We take most insurance companies. If you have any of the Hoosier insurance plans, we definitely work with those. Or if you have no insurance at all, they'll let that be a hurdle to you getting your child properly immunized. So 100 South 5th Street on Saturday the 12th between 10 and 2.
Okay. That's going to be a busy day.
Busy day. Busy day.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Christine Stinson, Executive Director, Wayne County Health Department. Next Saturday, 4 locations. If you need a mask, I assume they'll be given out the way that they were previously, which is a box of masks or 50 masks. A site in Fountain City, site in Centerville, Cambridge City, and Hagerstown, and a super shot Saturday, catching people up on their vaccines between 10 and 2 at the Health Department. That's all happening next Saturday. You're watching Ask the Doctors on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11, WCTV Channel 21, streaming on Facebook Live. We're taking your questions on our Facebook Live page as well as on Twitter at WCTV Info. Let's ask some questions. Christine Stinson stated that you can be reinfected after 3 months. Please expand on the issues of being reinfected. And I didn't see it, but I guess there was a post on Facebook that she did that some people talked about. It's possible to be reinfected, and I think we got that question a couple of weeks ago.
I think the first report of somebody being reinfected was a paper out of Hong Kong where somebody had contracted the virus back in March, and they had samples of that virus from the earlier infection. Then he got well and was reinfected, and they were able to tell from the genetic makeup of the two samples that he indeed had a second infection. But this appears to be, there aren't, I'm not aware of any, or Tom may be, I'll defer to him after I answer, of any other cases where they've proven that the patient has actually been reinfected. Now, there's been some confusion earlier when you would have people who had an infection and then they would be tested, and maybe a month or even longer later afterwards, and they would have a positive test. Well, it was felt that the test was picking up viral particles that were not infectious. In other words, the patient wasn't spreading disease. It was residual of his disease, and it wasn't a true reinfection. We do know, I'll end up by saying that we were hopeful at the beginning of the pandemic that people would have hopefully 8 or 10 months of immunity after having an infection, but it appears that in 80% of the people, the antibody level falls off pretty quickly. So what are your thoughts on reinfection, Tom?
Yeah, so I think you're right. We do have to distinguish between the prolonged positivity that we know can occur. I mean, we have experience at Reed with several folks who've continued to test positive for up to almost 3 months after being infected and sick, but they get well, and for various reasons they're getting retested and they continue to test positive. But that is a phenomenon that's well known and understood, and so it's the reason why the CDC recommends that you do not retest people. Don't condition any actions about return to work or anything else based on retesting. So they changed that recommendation. So we have to distinguish between that phenomenon and actual reinfection. And we had suspected that there could be the possibility of reinfection later because of we know that the antibody levels fall off, as you've described, Dave. But there was this first case in Hong Kong where a gentleman got sick later with a second set of symptoms, very mild on the second set, and the genetic makeup was such that they could tell that the second infection was from a different subtype than what he had originally. They call these subtypes clades in virology, and I have no idea where that word comes from, but it's CLADE, clade, these little families of subtypes that as the virus mutates, and so they form these families of subtypes. He did not get as sick the second time, so that the theory is that he had enough immunity from the first infection to partially immunize him from the second infection, not to, he obviously got sick with the second infection, but maybe the severity of it was mitigated by some, remaining immunity from the first infection. Then I think that there have been reports from a couple places in Western Europe. I think Belgium and Spain are the two that come to mind that I believe I'm correct on that, with similar stories. Not as ill the second time.
And they were able to approve those two with different
Yes, I think that's
subtypes?
right.
All right.
And then there is a fourth report from somewhere in the U.S., I think it could be in the Northeast, where actually the second illness was worse than the first one. And that's what's causing concern. So I think we don't really know all the details. There probably will be a lot more to be learned about these situations. But I guess the thing to know is that it looks like reinfection is possible, but it probably is very rare. I mean, we've got exactly 4 cases that we're sure of. Could be wrong. You know, it's like everything else when it comes to COVID. The state of knowledge of the science is changing rapidly. And we'll have to see how that plays out. I guess, in a sense, makes me concerned about whether a COVID vaccine, how immunizing will that be? How long will that last? Will we have to be re-immunized later? Kind of like we do with the flu vaccine, where they go through this whole process to figure out exactly which viruses and which variants of the viruses are going to be likely play a role, and that's how they develop the vaccines every year. And that's why we haven't been able to fully eliminate influenza, because the vaccines are only partially immunizing, and the virus mutates frequently. I have a feeling COVID will be something like that, unfortunately, going forward. So I commonly get the question, when is this going to be over, and will a vaccine just make it all go away? And I think it's probably wrong to have that expectation. It'd be great if it happens, but I think all the signs are pointing to the unlikeliness of this going away completely, and we just go back to life as normal. We're going to have some new accommodation to it, like we've done with influenza.
And I'm told in my ear, the voices in my head are back, that Christine Stinson is still on Zoom, so I'm going to let her speak to whatever it was that she put on Facebook, because I have to say I didn't see it, Christine. So do you want to speak to what your post was?
Sure. Well, I actually did a Facebook Live yesterday, and was taking questions from people, and we got to talking about quarantine and isolation. I was hoping people would ask me questions about cockroaches and mold, but all my questions steamed right back to COVID. So I was talking about the quarantine and isolation guidelines. And in the isolation and quarantine guidelines, if you're a known positive, you then have 90 days that you won't have to go back into quarantine if you're then identified as a close contact. And the state says that's because they give credit for 90 days immunity. And after that, it's unknown, but there's a possibility of being reinfected after those 90 days. So that's how that topic came up and was discussed about. Right. So, and I talked about someone that was infected in March, who then was identified as a close contact for the next 90 days, would not have to go into quarantine for 90 days. But after that, there's a possibility of reinfection, so they have to go back into isolation or quarantine if they're identified as a close contact.
Okay. That clears everything up. Any additions anybody wants to make?
No, I'm glad we let Christine have another opportunity to
We should have just asked her to
defend
begin with.
herself.
That was a whole lot simpler.
I didn't realize she was still there, and I didn't know what the question was when we brought it up. So there you go. You're watching Ask the Doctors on WGTV Channel 11. We're still taking your questions. What's the next one up? On average, how long does it take to fully recover from COVID-19? Does age affect how long that takes?
That's a good question. I think we've seen a huge variety in how long people are sick. Some people not very much and for not very long, but some people who, with severe illness, who take weeks and weeks to be able to get out of the hospital, and they're not well even then. It takes even a lot longer than that to fully get back to 100%.
I think there was a story this week of a woman who left the hospital after 4 months.
Right, exactly. And, I think it depends on what happens. I think that some people get things like myocarditis and so forth, and those people tend to have prolonged recovery times and so forth. So there's a lot of pieces in there. So for that reason, it's hugely variable. But I would say probably the average person on the street doesn't get particularly ill. It might be a week or two. But I do know that, some people have a prolonged fatigue issue, and that's probably the biggest prolonged symptom afterwards that I've heard about. The cough and fevers and myalgias go away relatively quickly, but prolonged fatigue, just an overwhelming fatigue, can last a while. And that's just what I'm familiar with. But I think when you can talk about the average case, but the reality is nobody's quite the average. There's a huge variety around that.
The loss of taste and smell, are you finding that coming back? You mentioned fatigue, but one of the things that you all have mentioned over the last number of weeks that really seems to be even a bigger indication of COVID is that loss of taste and smell. Have you found that coming back in patients?
Well, I don't have direct knowledge, except that there's a basketball player who there was a headline about him. He felt better, but something like 3 months afterwards, he still hadn't recovered his taste and smell. So I don't know. What do you think, Dave?
We would see patients at the end of flu season every year. I would probably see 3 or 4 patients a winter that would totally lose their sense of smell. They were anosmic. And this was an insult to the olfactory nerve itself. Whereas this seems to differ in that it's more attacks these little respiratory support cells around the nerve fibers. So it's not really attacking the nerve. So I'm hopeful that many of these people may recover their sense of smell because it's a different mechanism. And just to add, the other part of that question was age a factor in recovery? Mm-hmm. I don't think Tom got around to answering this, but it is. These younger patients, little children, young kids, they seem to recover much more quickly than older people.
Okay. Let's keep going. Next question up. Are the positive cases showing on Reed's site correct today? Yesterday it had a total of 508, and today it shows a total of 541. That's an increase of 33. Is this 33 in one day?
I guess you would say that that's the 33 new ones that are reported today, and may have accumulated over a couple of days, but they for the purposes of the report. But we have had a larger number of cases going through our lab. Now, you just have to realize what we're seeing through the Reed lab, through the Reed system, is different than what the county has, because we have patients who we see out in outlying counties or come in from outlying counties and so forth. And we do lots of testing on hospitalized patients who don't factor into the county statistics frequently. So we have had quite a few in the last few days. That's true. So I think those numbers are correct, and we have had a big jump recently.
But the big factor is those numbers are not all Wayne County. Those
Correct.
numbers are coming in from 8, 9 different counties?
Yes, 9.
Okay. We've got questions backed up, so we're going to keep going. Recognizing that we are at the beginning of our knowledge of the COVID virus, is there any data that shows a nursing baby receives immunity from their mom? What are the rules at Reed on the mother-baby unit, at the mother-baby unit, to keep everyone safe from COVID?
Well, first of all, the science of what they call the vertical transmission from mother to baby That appears to be pretty infrequent, and I think the thought is that to the extent that mothers transmit to babies, it's usually during the process of childbirth. So I think the number of cases nationally, worldwide, of the thought that baby acquired virus from mother through the placenta, those are very rare, if at all. But typically the baby may acquire the virus from the mother after birth or during the process of birth. And because of that concern about the transmission to the baby, typically the babies are separated from a positive mother in those early days, and baby's bottle fed, or maybe the mother pumps or provides the breast milk. But we do have to limit the contact between mother and baby because of concern about passing the virus.
That would be tough.
Yeah, it'd be
Can
hard.
you imagine a young mother giving birth and then not having contact with her baby?
We just don't have very many of those cases at Reed. If we have any, it's a very small number. But I have a sister-in-law who works at one of the larger hospitals in the Atlanta area. It's actually it's Northside Hospital, where they have numerous floors in one building, all labor and delivery, postpartum and prepartum and such like, and they do the most deliveries in the country. And they have a large number of COVID positive mothers and have this whole system set up, and so they have a lot more experience with it. And these are the things she tells me that they do as well.
You're watching Ask the Doctors. Let's ask them some more. Does your blood type affect how infectious or sick you may become?
Well, I think this was, I remember hearing a couple months ago that if you had blood type O, you were much more likely to do well with the virus. If you had blood type A, that you tended to have worse symptoms. But as far as I know, this has been disproven, and the current thought is that blood type is not a factor in how you're affected by COVID. What are your thoughts
to
on
my
this?
knowledge, it's not.
But you agree, weren't
a
there
big
some early
predictor.
reports to the effect that blood type would affect things?
But like we don't test people's blood types to try to gauge how severe they're going to be. There are other more important indicators of risk for severity. High high BMI, high weight, underlying health conditions like heart disease and lung disease,
Diabetes.
and such like. And diabetes is a particularly important one. I had this conversation this morning with somebody I was playing golf with. What are the risk factors? And really, I think when they do studies to look at the contribution of different risk factors, BMI has a bigger effect than most of the other indicators, actually.
Wow.
So, and particularly combinations of high BMI and other underlying conditions. So, but we don't test people's blood type because it just really isn't a significant issue.
We're taking your questions for Dr. Dr. David Jetmore, Dr. Thomas Huth. Okay, it's Friday. I like it.
I have a son named Thomas Jetmore who is a doctor. So
Maybe that's it. We
you're
were
on
having a
track.
conversation 5 weeks ago, and I remembered that. Thank you for that save. We're taking your questions on our Facebook page. You can also send them through Twitter at WCTV Info. Another question for the doctors. What advice can you give parents looking to reintroduce their children into schools after the first of the year? Do you think it will be safe to go back into the water?
Well, let me jump in, and then Dr. Jetmore can give the definitive answer because that's his area. But I think, if I had a child that age that was a school age, and a particular context here is they're saying after the first of the year. I assume that means after next January 1st. I think by then the schools are going to have all this figured out, and I'd be absolutely comfortable by then with what they think, what the best practice seems to be in managing children and teachers and COVID risk in the school setting. What do you think, Dr. Jetmore?
Well, I agree, Tom. I think we knew that the beginning of this school year would be rocky because it's new to everybody. I mean, nobody's taught school in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, teaching children is a difficult endeavor to start with when there's not a pandemic. But we've dealt with this. We've had children that have gotten ill with COVID. They've been sent home for their 10 days. We've traced out who they were in contact with. They've been isolated, and we've soldiered on. So I think, as you said, Tom, we're getting used to this. We're getting better at it, and I think by the first of the year, we'll have this thing down. But things are going well, and I think it is it riskier than not having school? Yes, it is, but it's certainly worth the risk because I think school is so important for these children.
Has it gone, just kind of a thought process, has this gone better than you expected it to? There's always, and I hate
It
to say
has
that
gone
from a
better than I
negative
expected, or I should say than I feared, because at the beginning there was so much uncertainty. I wasn't even sure if any of the teachers would come when we had those early talks about, and then some of the superintendents said, well, this is impossible. You couldn't have school with children who were wearing masks, that they wouldn't wear masks, that the teachers wouldn't wear masks, and we couldn't social distance. And we've surmounted most of those challenges. So my hat goes off to these teachers, the school nurses, the school bus drivers, the school custodians. I think they've done a fantastic job, and I think all of us are grateful for their endeavors.
We just have to see if the colleges can figure it out. 'Cause some of the college Greek houses haven't seemed to figure this deal out yet.
Yeah, they don't obey as well as a 9-year-old does, Eric.
You're watching Ask the Doctors on WGTV Channel 11 and WCTV Channel 21. We're going to take at least one more question, and then we're going to check out the numbers that Dr. Huth is providing to us. So let's go with one more question. I recently heard about a new testing method which uses saliva. How accurate is this test, this type of test, and is it available anywhere in Wayne County?
I think actually there might be a couple different technologies using saliva, but I'm going to assume that the questioner is asking about a version of the nucleoside test, the PCR, the nasal swab PCR test we all know and love. There's a version that uses saliva, and I know that it is being used in the county, and in fact, I think that's what they're using here on campus at IU East, is the saliva version of that. It still takes a couple of days to result. There are some other versions of that can result a lot more quickly. We are looking into at Reed of whether we can add on a version of it called Saliva Direct, and it uses saliva. It uses the PCR technology, but it doesn't require some of the intermediate processing steps, so it can result a lot more quickly within a day or so, as opposed to taking several days. And it's more of a process than it is a technology. It uses existing technology, but it's able to shorten some of the steps through different processing steps. That was devised by some researchers at Yale University. It's called Saliva Direct, and we're looking into it. It's just that a lot of organizations are trying to get Saliva Direct, so the Yale folk can't be responsive to everybody, and we're a little bit on hold on that. But that's a version of it. I'm not sure exactly what version is being used here at IU East, but IU East is the only place I know for sure is using saliva. There may be others.
Just a couple interesting additions to what Tom said. I found it interesting that the original subjects for the Yale group were NBA basketball players.
Uh-huh.
And the other thing that comes to mind is this eliminates so many problems. You can have somebody I think they just use sterile urine container jars. Someone can deposit some saliva in a jar and seal that. It eliminates, shortages in swabs for the nose and other things. So
Right.
it's a game changer because we're going to need hundreds of thousands of these tests before this thing is over.
I know we want to get to the numbers, but one of the things that, and even Christine mentioned that somewhere around November or so, the federal government is beginning to tell the counties, states to begin to make preparation for being able to deliver a vaccine. I know we've been hearing some things in the news this week that the FDA, if things are right, might allow something to go through before their third testing cycle is done. Can you talk about what you're hearing, your thoughts on where we are? The question was always, would we get anything before the middle of next year? Then it was, are we going to get anything before the beginning of the year? Now we're saying, Merry Christmas. What do you got?
Well, yes, earlier this week, I think that is the biggest news of the week, actually, is that the federal government is basically providing advance notice to the state departments of health to be prepared for vaccine availability as early as late October or maybe early November. And but I don't know, I'm not sure whether I know enough from what's been said as to whether this is actually rushing anything. Because I think what they've done to be able to bring the vaccine to market quicker is they've overlapped certain things, but they're still going through all the steps. I thought maybe it would be the Moderna vaccine, which is the very first one to go into phase 3 testing, but I learned later that it is the Pfizer version that they're thinking may be ready sooner. I don't know anything to say that it's not going to be safe and so forth, but maybe Dr. Jetmore knows more about what they're doing to be able to bring that to the market quicker. But I know that they have said all along, the FDA has said all along, this will be safe and they're not going to skip steps. They're just finding ways to collapse some of the processing. And you can see that that's possible to do from let's say you run a pharmaceutical development company and you've got multiple pharmaceuticals or vaccines in development for different disease conditions. You have to spread your resources across that. Essentially what they're doing is they're concentrating all their resources onto this one project. So the bad news is some of these other projects they have in the works are going to be delayed as a result of it, but it's a high enough priority that should be the case. And like I say, they're finding ways to since they can concentrate all focus on these particular vaccines, they can find ways to overlap some of the phasing and so forth.
Well, they've told local health departments to be prepared for a vaccine in late October, early November, and we can tell from the storage requirements for these two vaccines that the probable candidates are Pfizer and Moderna. One of the things that shaves off months of time is the government has told these drug companies that they can go ahead and start manufacturing the vaccine. Normally you don't do that. If you're a drug company, you wait until stage 3 is over with, you've got final approval from the FDA, and then you tool up to manufacture the vaccine. So they've already tooled up, they're already making this vaccine, so that eliminates a long wait. The other thing is between phase 1 and 2 and stage 2 and 3, those are kind of bureaucratic stages where you go to the FDA and you have hearings and they can last for months. Well, the government was able to wipe out all of that red tape. So I think we've had a normal stage 1 and a normal stage 2. I'm worried that we may have an abbreviated stage 3. And the cautionary tale that's always told about this is that when Gerald Ford was president, they had the swine flu. And he went ahead and released this vaccine before stage 3 was finished, and there were, I think, 50 cases of Guillain-Barré, which is a paralysis, and 30 people died. So it was these are, you almost hate to say these things because you don't want to frighten people, but these are the things that make people not want to take a vaccine. Now that's an alarming statistic, Eric, because I've heard that 40% of the 40% of the people already don't take the flu vaccine. We have it every year. Mm-hmm. They refuse to take it. But people will not take a vaccine unless they have confidence in it. And the way they get confidence in a vaccine are through these trials. Don't you agree, Tom?
Yeah,
and
sure.
I think it's not like giving medicine to a sick person. You're giving an injection to a person who's perfectly well. So it cannot have anything go wrong. So we'll see how it goes. The other thing is our economy desperately needs for something to be done to kind of end this thing.
We've probably got about 6 or 7 minutes left to go. We
Sure.
want to get to your numbers so everybody can kind of see the weekly lab cases and things of that nature.
Sure, and I'm sure Ryan and Stephen will be able to show the graphs. If you could go to the first page, actually start with the Wayne County statistics. There you go, and we've seen these before. I prepare the graphs. Christine actually provides the data. I just have a spreadsheet I can plug into easily, so I continue to do that. But we can see that the numbers have been high compared to, earlier in the pandemic for the last 6 or 7 weeks. And the last bar is gray because those numbers are incomplete. It's the week that will end tomorrow. So we still have some numbers that aren't in there yet, so they're subject to change. I think basically what we have is a plateau, as Christine described earlier. But I think the thing that I've always been amazed about is that we've got much higher numbers coming out of Wayne County now in the last 6 or 7 weeks than we had in April, when Reed had huge, from our perspective, huge numbers in the hospital, lots of patients on ventilators, and it was, it was a lot heavier experience for Reed. But now in the county, we've got a lot more community cases, basically. And we have had increasing numbers in the hospital of late, and you can flip to that graph now, Stephen and Ryan, and I've included every week since we started keeping the statistics on. It starts with the week that ended on April the 4th, and you can see we had very high numbers in isolation zones. That's the blue bar. The red bars are the laboratory confirmed positives in the hospital. And the last bar that should be gray is the average number of cases per day on ventilators, COVID cases on ventilators. We can see those numbers decline down to about the week of July the 11th, and then have been increased a bit since then. We're not up to what we were on the blue bars in the spring, but we are doing some things different with the processing of people in the isolation zones, so that can account for some of that. But what I would note is that for the laboratory positives, the red bars, those are at higher numbers than we have ever had in the pandemic, consistently in the last 5 weeks or so. Fortunately, the numbers on ventilators have been pretty stable at around 1 to 3 a day on average. And I think we had 3 this morning. So those are real people. We don't want people to be that sick. And, it's not vast numbers. It's certainly from the standpoint of what we can handle. It's well within our capabilities. We can handle multiples higher than this. We're confident now about all that. But we don't want higher numbers, We want, because real people have to get sick for that to happen. And I don't want people to experience that. So it goes back to, we've all got to do our part this weekend with the holiday to protect ourselves, protect each other, protect those at high risk. We just have to kind of go out with that mantra and just be careful and be responsible for each other.
We are at about 3 minutes left to go. Let me give you a chance to kind of head into a wrap-up, do any kind of final thought that you might have.
Well, it's Labor Day weekend. We're all going to get together, many of us with our family and friends, and I think it's important to be careful. Don't make Christine's dire prediction come true. Let's not have a spike in the week following Labor Day weekend. But on the other hand, let's enjoy the simple pleasures of celebrating a holiday with family and friends. Let's enjoy life, but let's be safe.
I think the conversation after this weekend is really going to be looking toward that Thanksgiving, Christmas time, particularly if we don't have a vaccine. That's a long kind of 4 to 6 week stretch where we are really used to gathering. This kind of started after Christmas for us most of the time, so it'll be interesting to see what that looks like.
I want to emphasize that I can. We're going to have availability of flu vaccine pretty soon, and we all really need to get that because we really can't afford to have a bad flu experience and COVID experience this winter together.
When do you think we'll have a flu vaccine for
I
the
think some of the
flu?
pharmacies are getting them now. We've actually gotten some of our deliveries at Reed, and we're disseminating those to the offices now and asking the primary care offices to use those with their high-risk patients even now. I had the question the other day, if I have access to flu shot now, should I go ahead and get it even though it still feels like it's summer? I think the answer is yes, get it when you can because you don't want to run the risk of not getting it. If it's available, take it. And, it's not too early.
Dr. David Jetmore, Wayne County Health Officer. I didn't say public this time. I keep wanting to throw that in there. I'm not sure why. Wayne County Health Officer, Dr. Thomas Huth, Vice President, Medical Affairs at Reed Health, and also available to be seen on WHIO-TV Wednesday evenings at 5 p.m. Gentlemen, thank you very much. I hope you enjoy your holiday weekend. Go work on that golf game just a little bit more.
Well, I'm going to take a break this weekend. I've had enough golf for one weekend, but I appreciate the sentiment, and you have a great weekend too, Eric.
Thank you. Reminder, and we'll do it again, but mark your calendar, next Saturday, 4 locations between 12 and 3. There will be mask giveaways within Wayne County, in Fountain City, in Centerville, in Cambridge City, and in Hagerstown. Keep an eye on the WCTV Facebook page as well as our Twitter feed and Instagram for information on those exact locations. And also next Saturday between 10 and 2, Super Shot Saturday, a chance to catch up on some of your vaccines. That will be taking place at the Wayne County Health Department. Don't forget, if you want to do some shopping online, you can shop online at the Richmond Farmers Market. If you want to go to the Richmond Farmers Market, it's there for you every Saturday between 8 a.m. and 12 p.m. And a lot of people are really interested in Pottery Palooza and how things are getting done. That is going to be Saturday, September 5th. It is going to be virtual, so check out the richmondartmuseum.org for more information. Thanks for watching Ask the Doctors. As always, I wish you well. Have a great weekend.